He and the All-Stars changed into their red sorbisol uniforms in the dugout, there being no place else, and people looked away as they did it. Nowadays people would look, but then they didn't. And the Babe and his teammates tossed the ball around, then sat down, and out came the Schroeders. They ran around and warmed up, and you could see by their nonchalance how nervous they were. E.J. batted grounders to them and hit one grounder zinging into the visitors' dugout, missing the Babe by 6 inches. He was too sick to move. The All-Stars ran out and griped to the ump, but the Babe sat like he didn't know where he was. The ump was scared. The Babe hobbled out to home plate for the ceremonial handshakes and photographs, and E.J. put his arm around him as the crowd stood cheering and grinned and whispered, "We're gonna kill you, you big mutt. First pitch goes in your ear. This is your last game. Bye, Babe." And the game got underway. It was a good game, it's been said, though nobody remembers much about it specifically, such as the score, for example. The All-Stars were nobodies. Only the Babe mattered to the crowd. And the big question was, would he play? He looked too shaky to take the field, so some said, suspend the rules. Why not let him just go up and bat? He can bat for the pitcher. Why not? It wouldn't hurt anything. And nowadays they might do it. But back then you didn't pick up the bat unless you also picked up your glove and played a position. And others said that maybe it wouldn't hurt anything, but once you start changing the rules of the game for convenience, then what happens to our principles, or do we change those too? So the game went along, a good game, except that the Babe sat sprawled in the dugout, the little black man dipping cloths in a bucket of ice and laying them on the great man's head. A cool fall day, but he was hot. And between innings he climbed out and waved to the fans, and they stood and cheered and wondered would he come to bat. E.J. said to Bernie, he'll bat all right, and when he comes, remember the first pitch, hard and high and inside. He looks too weak to get the bat off his shoulder, Dad. He looks like a breeze would blow him over. I can't throw at Babe Ruth. He's not sick. He's pretending so he don't have to play like the rest of us. Look at him, big, fat, rich New York son of a bitch. I bet he's getting $500 just to sit there and have a pickaninny put ice on him. Boy, I'd put some ice on him, you know where. Boy, he'd get up quick then. He'd be ready to play then. He comes up, I want you to give him something to think about, so he knows we're not all a bunch of dumb hicks out here happy just to have him show up. I want him to know that some of us mean it. You do what I say, I'm serious. It was a good game, and people enjoyed it. The day cool and bright, delicious, smelling of apples and leather and wood smoke and horses, blazed with majestic colors, as if in a country where kings and queens ride through the cornfields into the triumphant reds and oranges of the woods, and men in November playing the last game of summer, waiting for the Babe, everyone waiting for the Babe. As runs scored, hours passed, the sky turned red and hazy. It was about time to quit and go home, and then he marched out, bat in hand, and 3,000 people threw back their heads and yelled as loud as they could. They yelled for 1 solid minute, and then it was still. The Babe stood looking toward the woods until everything was silent, then stepped to the plate and waved the bat, and Bernie looked at him. It was so quiet you could hear coughing in the crowd. Way to the rear, a man said, "Merle, you get your hands off her and shut up now." And hundreds turned and shushed him. Then Bernie wound up. He bent way down and reached way back and kicked up high, and the world turned and the ball flew, and the umpire said, "Ball 1." And the catcher turned and said, "Be quiet, this doesn't concern you." And the umpire blushed. He knew immediately that he was in the wrong. Babe Ruth was not going to walk to first base. He'd sooner strike out, and would do it himself with no help from an umpire. So the umpire turned and walked away. The Babe turned and spat and picked up a little dirt and rubbed his hands with it. People thought, look, that's our dirt. He's putting it on his hands, as if the Babe might have brought his own. And then stood in and waved the bat, and Bernie went way down and reached way back and kicked high, and the world turned and the ball flew, and the babe swung and missed. He said, "Huh," and staggered. And the next pitch, he swung and cried in pain, and the big slow curve slapped into the catcher's mitt. It was so still they heard the babe clear his throat, like a board sliding across dirt. They heard Bernie breathing hard through his nose. The people were quiet, wanting to see, hear, and smell everything and remember it forever. The wet fall dirt, the pale white bat, the pink cotton candy in the gentlemen's hats, the smell of wool and the glimmer of a star in the twilight, the touch of your dad's big hand and your little hand in it. Even E.J. was quiet, chewing, watching his son. The sun had set beyond right field. Darkness was settling. You had to look close to see. Bernie took 3 steps toward home and pointed at the high outside corner of the plate, calling his pitch, and the babe threw his head back and laughed 4 laughs. People were glad to hear he was feeling better, but it was scary to hear a man laugh at home plate. Everyone knew it was bad luck. He touched the corner with his bat. Bernie climbed back on the mound. He paused. He bent down low and reached way back and kicked real high, and the world turned and the ball flew, and the babe swung, and it cracked, and the ball became a tiny white star in the sky. It hung there as the babe went around the bases in his famous Babe Ruth stride, the big graceful man trotting on slim little feet, his head down until the roar of the crowd rose like an ocean wave on the prairie. And he looked up as he turned at third. He smiled, lifted his cap, strode soundlessly across home plate, looking like the greatest ball player in the history of the world. The star was still in the sky, straight out due northwest of the center field fence, where he hit it. The ball was never found, though they searched for it for years. "Did you see that?" your dad says, taking your hand. You say, "Yes, I did." Even E.J. saw it and stood with the rest, and he was changed after that, as were the others. A true hero has some power to make us a gift of a larger life. The Schroeders broke up, the boys went their own ways, and once they were out of earshot, E.J. sat in the sidetrack tap and bragged them up, the winners he produced and how they'd shown Babe Ruth a pretty good game. He was tolerated, but Babe Ruth was revered. He did something on that one day in our town that made us feel we were on the map of the universe, connected somehow to the stars, part of the mind of God. The full effect of his mighty blow diminished over time, of course, and now our teams languish, our coaches despair. Defeat comes to seem the natural course of things. Lake Wobegon dresses for a game, they put on their jock straps, pull on the socks, get into the colors, they start to lose heart and turn pale. Fear shrivels them. "Boys, this game may be your only chance to be good," he might tell them. "You might screw up everything else in your life, and poison the ones who love you, create misery, create such pain and devastation it'll be repeated by generations of descendants. Boys, there's plenty of room for tragedy in life. So if you go bad, don't have it be said that you never did anything right. Win this game."